Welcome to Total Network Operations, the podcast dedicated to hardworking network operators like you who deliver all the packets and deliver all the services. Here on TNOps, we shine a laser beam on great ideas in NetOps so you can take away useful ideas and make informed decisions for your network and your team. I'm Scott Robon. Today, we have with us Bill Hunter, the Senior Director of Service Delivery at Estrella. Bill has a ton of networking industry experience in various roles. I'll let him talk about that to the extent that he wants to. I know Bill to be a focused, can-do, data-driven services and operations leader, and I'm pleased as punch to have him here today. Bill, welcome to TNOps. Tell us more about yourself, what you do, and what's important to you as a leader in NetOps.
Sure. That's a pretty wide question. So I guess we can start out with, and as always, Scott, it's great to talk to you. We've known each other for quite a while here. So, what is kind of the Bill Hunter story? I guess it is the start. And in simple terms, I was born in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And my father was a career naval officer. And what that means is that we moved a lot. And the reason I'm telling this backstory is when you move a lot when you're a kid, two things happen. Number one is you become resilient, which I think is an important part of any person who's involved in network operations. And the second part is you learn to roll with the punches, whatever those punches might bring. So I think there's some important lessons that I had when I was a kid that have paid off later. They weren't very pleasant, at the time, but in retrospect, they were important. After school, I joined this organization called the United States Marine Corps. So, and again, I guess we can get back to the resilience piece. And
well, don't the Navy folks like to remind you that the Marine Corps is part of the Navy?
Yeah, well, there's a joke there about the Navy being great Uber drivers, but I won't go into it too much.
No, thank you for the ride. Thank you for the ride. I've heard that.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we need to get somewhere so we can get our medals. So again, joined the Marine Corps, and a couple things came out of that. Number one is, well, I should say, in addition to all of the kind of adherence to discipline and roles and procedures that are so important, truly learning to understand why you inspect things. If you want to get results, it's a classic thing. You get what you inspect. Again, that's so important on the network operations side, right? But leading up to that, really, that was my first taste in networking. The Marine Corps was the first service to adhere to a network operating standard inside of the DoD. It was a thing called Banyan Vines, right? Which, those of us that have been in the business for a while have heard that term before. And they sent me to school for it, and I became a Banyan Vines person, right? First part of networking. And the last thing I'll add about the Marine Corps, especially for those of us that are in the computer industry, the networking industry, is the importance of physical fitness. I'm saying this as someone who very unfortunately has had a couple of friends pass away in the not very distant past who were not old at all, some of whom
right.
And I think that it's easy in this industry, in this world, to kind of not pay attention to that. And I have at times in my life. But I would encourage everybody, if you don't have a plan on physical fitness, it doesn't have to be anything drastic. You don't have to be Schwarzenegger. Just get out there and move a little bit, and I think that'll yield tremendous dividends.
Are there, couldn't agree with you more on this, and I've wrestled with this on and off my whole adult life. Are there habits from your days in the Corps that continue to this day that help you with that? Or
yeah, PT every day. I mean, I'm not able to do it every day now.
Sure.
I'm 4 times a week, if I'm going to be honest. I consider that a success if I hit it 4 times a week. And I guess the answer to that is form a habit.
Yeah.
It's a classic thing. Do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then all of a sudden you're doing it every day. And it doesn't have to be expensive or anything. I mean, Christ, just go for a walk. That's okay too.
Yeah.
So just move, just get around. You'll feel better, and it's better for you.
Good starting point. Developing habits for also things and hygiene in network operations. So let's start to go there.
Everything is about repeatability. Correct.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's start with clarity on your title, service delivery.
Sure.
Now, there's a lot of folks in NetEng who don't understand the connection with NetOps from service delivery, and different organizations use the term service delivery differently. What does it mean for what you do and your connections to NetOps?
Sure. So Astrea, well, I'll start with Astrea itself. So Astrea is a medium and quite frankly growing quite quickly MSP organization that caters to large hyperscalers. Let's put it that way, right? I believe we're about 2,000 people right now globally.
Wow.
And my role is I'm I have to be careful about what I say here, what I don't.
Understood.
Again, I am responsible for helping running network operations, let's put it that way, at one of these hyperscalers.
Yep.
So if you think about it from just a standard networking perspective, I'm running the NOC that takes all of the ticket data and information that comes out of the network and takes appropriate action to keep the network up and running and happy.
Got it. And I know that's the tip of the iceberg. We're going to scratch below the surface there on multiple things. But so talk about a day in the life of your role. What do you do? What does your team do? Where are you spending most of your time?
Sure. So we're a 24/7 operation operating in three theaters: North America, Asia, and Europe. What my day is that I get up and of course I do my physical training as we've discussed.
Sure.
I'll usually open up my laptop at around 7. I have something that I call my coffee report, which is I have actually it's several reports that really gives me insight. Number one, on is there any immediate action I need to take? And the answer to that, thankfully, is almost never, right? But that is the first thing that I look at. Second thing is there anything happening over the last week, over the last month, about which I need to be aware? And of course, that's something that I'll look at. I'll understand those trends before it happens, but I'm watching closely because we get a ton of data, both out of the ticketing system and out of machine language out of the network, as I'm sure you'll dig down on later.
Right.
Then go in, shower and everything, and then I'm usually into work by about 8:45. I work in Reston, Virginia. And my day mainly consists of a series of meetings around how we can optimize the team in the network. And then I have an Asia Pac team at night, and I'll get back on at 8, 9 at night, have a conversation with them, then I'm done. That's pretty much my day.
Yeah. Do you get to take some time in the middle of that day to give you a break between East and West, or?
Yeah, so I'll make so it's actually a good question. I make a concerted effort to step away at points in the day, just where I can kind of think and talk to my spouse and all that kind of good stuff if I'm home.
Right.
I'll certainly take a break for dinner before it's Asia Pac time. I guess that's a very long way to say yes to your question.
Yeah, but it is a challenge, right? And anything that's attached to an operational network or any kind of operational service that does take care and feeding by someone. Humans are still in control. Skynet has not been activated yet.
Yeah, and I should also add that I've got great managers in each region that report.
Sure.
So they do Scott, they do a tremendous job keeping me out of things I shouldn't be in, and they don't want me to be in, right? They want to run their own business. So I want to make sure that's well understood. This isn't a one-man show. That's ridiculous. We have
for sure. Have you over time, there's a personality that has a really hard time letting go of, distributed responsibility and delegated responsibility. Does that describe you in the past or today? And how have you dealt with things like that?
In the past, yes. I have, well, I like to think anyway, I've matured out of that. I feel as a senior leader in an organization, beyond keeping the lights on, my main job in many ways is to bring up my replacement, whoever that might be, right?
Sure.
This is back to Marine Corps life again.
Sure.
If the leader is going up the hill and something happens to that person, somebody else needs to know who they are and step in immediately and continue the charge, right?
Yep.
It's the same thought, and if anything, in this world that we're in right now, people jump from organization to organization, as you're well aware. It's a risk that needs to be managed, and again, I think that's my main job, to manage the risks, and therefore I spend a lot of time on making sure my team knows everything that's going on. And there are a couple of people who are really, really strong in my organization, and I spend more time with them as well.
Got it. Got it. Let me ask you for a little compare and contrast from working with the carriers to working with the hyperscalers.
Okay.
Our work experience together was more carrier focused.
Mhm.
And I think there's some perceptions, which may be myth, maybe reality. You tell us, that the hyperscalers just know how to do all of this and it just all happens automatically. Whereas the carriers are still doing it all the old school way. How would you compare and contrast what that looks like from your carrier experience to now working with hyperscalers?
That's a loaded question, Scott. So my one-word answer is velocity.
Okay.
Okay. The one thing that is amazing I mean, just amazing, Scott, on the hyperscaler front is their capability to deploy equipment and operate the network. They are much, much less adverse to risk
Hmm.
than some of the traditional carriers that you and I have worked with in the past.
5 nines, Bill.
Uh,
Five nines.
uh, uh, if you architect the network correctly, you can lose all kinds of equipment and you can still kill 5 nines.
Sure.
I'll say that, right?
Okay.
And that's a function of smart architecture and spend.
Sure.
But looking back on our carrier days, part of my story here is I spent a number of years at Cisco as well. And I wasn't in services then. I was on the engineering team on the 7500 and 72, for those of you who've been in this business a long time. And I had a lot of interaction with some customers who knew what they were doing. And I want to call one customer out. And I think you know who I'm going to say. It's AT&T.
Sure.
It's the old AT&T Bell Labs. Okay. They taught me many, many things that I'm grateful for.
Sure.
Sometimes I didn't appreciate the way the lessons were given, but nonetheless, they taught me what problem analysis meant. And that's something that I think has been important in my career on the hyperscaler side, is to bring that experience over and apply it in this much higher velocity space.
Sure.
Okay. There's an inference. I don't know if I'm using the correct word, but I'll say that in your question, that the hyperscalers just know it all and they're going 1,000 miles an hour. That's not true necessarily. They're learning too.
And that's fair. That's totally fair. Yeah.
And my experience is they're happy when I bring this to their attention, something that I've learned back in the AT&T days. So I think a best practice maybe is to meld those worlds. And one of the things that is so important in the hyperscaler world, again from my perspective, is the capability to get machine language, again, and ticketing data out of that, be in a DevOps environment where you can build tools quickly if you need to, like in an hour, right?
Right.
I actually have developers on my staff, which is something that's different from the traditional NOC environment. And so, we can, again, it's pretty amazing to be able to do, looking back on it, like how things were done in the past, that we can get all that data, build some tooling if we need to, do some interpretation, and make good decisions on the fly that match the velocity of the build and govern scale. That
Sure.
in the old days, there was just no way.
Right. Yeah, the ability to generate telemetry and all other sorts of data. We can create our own big data problems today with just information from network elements. Right.
Absolutely. It's a huge data lake. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's move to that. You and I have been talking about this, and you've made it super clear that you take a very data-based approach to what you do. Tell me what drives it. what are the blessings of having lots of data to draw on, and maybe some of the curses?
Okay. Yes, I agree. Data is important. Number one.
Right.
Okay. And like I say, I want to be able to leverage everything I can because at the end of the day, I want to be able to optimize my operation. Okay. If the network I support is going to grow by 2x in a year,
Yeah.
I can't grow headcount, for instance, by 2x, right? This is an impossibility from a business standpoint.
Right.
So what do you do? Okay. And I'll say the kind of the 100,000-foot trick line, which is, I need to turn all that data into actionable information, right? Data is just data. Those and ones useless.
And what are you collecting? Like, what are the data sources? Like, are you talking
Sure.
about net flow, streaming telemetry,
All,
way
all,
more? Yeah.
all of the above, everything that touches a network device,
Okay.
we're able to consume. In addition to that, there is, again, I need to kind of watch what I say here, but
Sure.
there's an automation stack out there in the network as well that does some interpretation for us, and which I'm sure it happens in many clients now who you talk to, that gives us some additional, what I'll say, personal, can be actioned by a person information, right, quickly. So the
Right.
automation stack is being pushed forward onto the devices. It's not just all the devices talking, and then it comes out. So it's network elements, really it's network elements, ticketing systems, and then tools that we build ourselves that help us interpret those two items at speed.
Okay. Um, you've also mentioned that you're trying to actively move from just measuring what is, and that being a lagging indicator,
Yeah.
to turning it into predictability, actionable information.
Yeah.
Unpack that to the extent that you can.
Sure. So so first off, this organization that I'm responsible for now, just got formed back in May, where there were some different network operators involved that got all put underneath Astrea. And as part of that, we really started out with saying, okay, we have all these points of data, all these data sources. All right, let's take a step back. Let's everybody breathe a little bit, and let's pick those things we think which are most important that we can measure, that we think we don't know, that we think are indicative of something happening in the future. Okay. And again, I want to give my team credit.
Sure.
They're the ones that went out and did the hard work on this and really looked at this. And they came back with 14 points in all this data lake, right? That said, we think these are the ones we can measure accurately, that if we effectively think of them as tuning knobs that we can play with to see what the outcome was. So far, I know in our conversation previously we said 11. I'm going to back off on that a little bit. And
I wasn't gonna put you on the spot on
no,
perfect metrics there, but okay.
please do. So we're finding it's less than 11. We'll say that. More than 5, less than 11. Okay. And right now we're looking at those ones that we think are effective, and we're effectively, I don't want to say playing with them, but we are, because we don't know what the outcome is.
Okay.
But I can tell you that one that we have touched, which is it's very intuitive to say, but now we have proof of it. That says if we touch a ticket within a given time, that the probability of that ticket closing within SLA is radically improved. Okay.
So that's maybe one of your top hitters on
It is.
a successful outcome.
It is.
Having a certain minimum response time to an open ticket.
Yeah. And everybody says, okay, well, no kidding. Right. But now we've proved it. We have data that says we used to be at X%. Now we're at a much higher percent. And because of that, our SLA improved by 2 points. There's a direct line we can see with that.
Sure.
Right.
And is it that simple of writing it on the whiteboard? Are you doing any kind of statistical regression?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So we work with a lot of mathematicians. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
and I'm simplifying it to a great
I totally
degree.
get it. Yeah. Yep.
So the answer to your question is yes, there is a regression involved, and we're confident in our math. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. So it's interesting that as your example, or at least one example you can talk about here, this is really a human-oriented process. You need to have a person respond to the ticket in a short of amount of time. And so your process optimizations, again, from our conversations we've been having on this, you're really looking at some of the human side of the problem, or even mostly. You're not necessarily throwing automation to solve all these problems immediately. You're looking at how the team works.
It's a path, right? It's a
Yep.
path. And this is something that I'm very open with my engineers on staff, is what we do today is probably not what we're going to do in a year. And it certainly won't be what we do in 2 years.
Right.
And I think it's very relevant for your audience to hear, it's great to have a JNCIE, being Juniper guys. I'll pick that first. Or any one of a series of certifications. That's great.
Sure.
If you're a smart networking person with Python experience too, you will not suffer unemployment.
Okay. Noted. I'm flagging the tape right here.
Exactly.
Bill says learn Python. Got it.
Yes. Yes. And whatever is after Python, I don't know, right?
Sure. It could be Go. It will, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And back to this point is like, certainly we're operating with the human-based knobs, again, for lack of a better phrase.
Sure.
But we're looking at our processes and events in the network constantly. And the typical event that happens in any network is a card fails. All right. We have some kind of line card and whatever, that bombs out wherever, offsite in some popper.
Gamma rays took that card down.
So, by the way, it's cosmic radiation. We can talk about that if you want, but that's a different topic. If that's such a typical thing and it's repeatable, why do we have humans involved in it?
Right.
Have an automation stack. Automation stack can trigger, the problem statement and ticket. Ticket can be read by automation. It says, oh, this is a line card that's dead in Wichita, Kansas, and automatically generates a ticket back to the vendor of the equipment. RMA is generated. RMA time comes in, automatically generates a smart hand person, go on site, meet the card. The tech that goes on site has a little application on his phone that says, here's your mop, do X, Y, and Z. When you're done with your mop, press this button, auto test or make sure it's reliability up in the network. Everything comes up again, done. The only human touch should be the person that slides the line card in. I mean, we're not there yet, but I think that's a great example of where it's going to go.
Right. And you've broken this down into a series of tasks that go into workflow.
Exactly.
Right? And figured out what pieces do I not need human involvement in. Right. And I don't have robots that will go and replace the line cards yet. Right. So I'm still dispatching a tech for that. And I'm sure you're thinking about it. You're not alone.
Yep. Absolutely we are. And, and I use that because it's such an easy example for anyone that's in this business.
Right.
There are myriad of problems on top of that as well, especially about, how we communicate with the vendor of the equipment. And there's all kinds of things we can do that I find exciting in this space.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting for my engineers too.
And man, keeping it exciting is one way to keep people really engaged. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes that's, just airing what needs to be done with what people's interests are and putting the puzzle pieces together. Right. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about my jobs over the years. That's if I can look at it as a game and assembling a puzzle, matching what needs to be done with what people are actually interested in doing, that's a win-win. So,
yeah. And we're solving a puzzle at velocity.
Right. Right. The fastest Rubik's Cube solution ever. Yeah.
It's funny. My boss actually has a Rubik's Cube on his desk. And when I'm talking to him, he plays with it. It's funny. It's really funny.
So you've got this great mix of dealing with human process, but the ability to use and to modify and extend your automation stack. Yep. And you've got two types of people working on the team that are geared different ways. Talk about how the tooling interacts and how the people are different typically in those two different pieces of the ops team.
So first off, I'll make a general statement. You lead people and you manage machines and processes.
Okay.
Starting with that, I think it's important for everybody to understand, and this is such a throwaway line inside of business, but I'll say it. Everybody needs to understand the mission statement, number one, right? Keep the
It's not
network
a
up.
throwaway. It's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And there are many different types of people and animals in this networking environment that we work in, right?
Sure.
And what you're digging at there, I think, and the way I'm going to answer the question is the network engineer people, they will absolutely do things efficiently as fast as possible to get the network back up and running and move on. Okay. What I've seen is the developers that are on my staff, and this is something I talk to them all the time about actually, is they seem to be they want to engineer a solution to the 100%.
Sure.
And great, right? You can also spend 95% of your time engineering the last 1% of a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we iterate. That we deploy and iterate. That's the way this world works. And so it's been it's been interesting for me actually to bring developers on the staff again, which is a new thing, and have them push back on me when I push on them on velocity, what's motivating them and their level of comfort with moving forward, right? And I think that when I'll call them the operators and the developers, how's that?
Okay, sure.
They really lived in two different camps in the beginning and eyed each other suspiciously. Let's say that, right?
Right.
It's been fun to bring them together, right? Because I think the operators are beginning to realize that the developers aren't a threat. They're not a threat. They're here to help me do my job better. And if I'm smart, I'm going to see what they're doing, right? And I'm going to start adopting some of that process and methodology. I'm going to mine them, if you will,
Sure.
right? So the team has grown together. I think there's more work to do on bringing the developers along still. But I'm optimistic, very optimistic. We have to do it. We have to do it. And the developers have an opportunity to see what's happening in the network too, which is new for them.
Yeah, I mean, you could live that cloistered life and just say, "Look, it worked on my machine," and push that back to main, right? And then be done with it and not have to suffer any consequences.
Those days are over.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, you called them the operators and the developers, and you used the D word earlier, DevOps. When you refer to your DevOps team, are you thinking both of those communities together? Or are you thinking primarily the developer team?
No, it's everybody. It's everybody.
Okay.
It's the operations team.
Okay.
It's all in, and we all are successful together or we fail together.
What else do you think would help, bridge those communities, if you will? I'm sorry to overuse the term community, but the groups, like you said, they were eyeing each other suspiciously at the start.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's been erosion of the walls between. That's good. What else can you do to lead through that, not manage it, right? Just like you said earlier.
Make everybody understand what the future looks like.
Okay.
In my opinion, right? Which is, you're going to see much, much, much more heavy development on the fly of tooling systems. Again, honestly, I think you're going to see fewer pure network operators and more developers.
Sure.
That's the future, right? So as people in this business, we have a responsibility to understand what's happening. And I'm very open about that with my staff and so it's not two camps. Back to your point, if somebody wants to go to school and go do Python or whatever, I'll pay for it. Yeah, go, man. I love it. So I'm always encouraging people to actively, pursue things that meld those 2 points, number one. And I've got a couple of developers going through JNCIA right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
So it's, and after you do that, um, you have a feather in your cap in the organization.
sure.
And
That's
and,
some
and
really good cross-pollination, right?
yeah,
Across, yeah, yeah,
like I say, if you know networking and you're a developer, you will not suffer unemployment for the foreseeable future, for sure.
how have you done? This is a bigger question. Coming from the trad networking side of things, when they hear the term DevOps or net DevOps, there's a visceral reaction like, I have to learn all this new tooling. I've got to learn Git. I need to understand what a pipeline is. I'm going to
Yep.
have other people checking my configs. I never
Yeah.
had to have people check my configs before, Bill.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of that reaction to having DevOps tooling pushed on them. How has that adjustment been for the operators? And I want to ask the same question about adjustments for the developers being exposed to the operational network.
Yeah. That's actually a good question. So I th- okay, I know I'm going to answer it. So the real story is on the operator side. The way I look at it now is that the operators effectively are the customer. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
The the developers need to get ideas from the operators on how to make their jobs more efficient, right?
Okay. The
It,
operator
it,
job more efficient.
the operator job more efficient. Thank you for the clarification. Yes, exactly, right? It's like, what tooling do you need based upon the current network environment that will allow you to scale to 2x the number of problems? I'm making this up, right? Since there's not going to be, if there's 50 a year now, we're not going to get to 100. Matter of fact, we're probably going to go to 40. And so, what do you need? I mean, and it's up to you. Communicate, solve your problem, right? That actually the main, uh, uh, I should say, a conduit of requests from the operators to the DevOps folks, in addition to sitting together and all that, is the SMEs on the operator side of the house. That's one of their key jobs, is trying to figure out what else can we do if we automate things to help make the rest of the staff more efficient. That's a major thing they do. People think of SMEs as, oh, there's somebody who's there. If we have a tough problem, we'll ask them, and
Right.
but it's way more than that. It's way more than that. At least in my world, those guys have a responsibility on the optimization, and they have goals around it.
Sure.
So I guess that's the way I'll answer it. Is it's a right now inside of my world, it's a customer, provider relationship,
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
and
Yeah.
and that's the way we're currently operating, and that way everybody sees value in what's happening.
So that's great, right? Being able to make sure both sides of the coin see that, right? If
Yeah.
if you, I'll ask it maybe a slightly different way. Who's had to adjust more, the operators or the developers, or is it roughly a tie?
No, it's never a tie. I'm not going to wimp out on you. In the immediate term, the developers. In the long term, it's going to be the operators for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. What what other, like, what's the next inflection point for this team to grow together and operate together more as a unit, more as a whole?
Time, number one. Number two is we're a little bit fragmented along the lines of the equipment that we support historically, since it was different teams. And so we've got to grow those two teams together from a training standpoint, which we're
Mhm.
well underway, and the team is really embracing it. So I'm happy about that, right? There's some tooling issues that we have to get through with regard to how the queues work, and stuff that people have to deal with all the time. Um,
Do you
Again,
mean do you mean network traffic queues or trouble ticket queues or
all the
something
above,
else?
all the
Yeah.
above,
Okay.
actually. So, thank you for the clarification. Really, what I was referring to was the ticket queues. but
Gotcha.
it's the traffic patterns as well. I mean, the scale where we're working sometimes just boggles my mind.
I was asking about what it's like to um, the next milestones to have the team function together more as a unit.
Yeah, milestones together working as a unit. So clearly, we need work to integrate the team more based upon the devices that we worked on in the past. That's number one. Number two is there's some tooling changes that we have to go through, especially with relate to network queues, network ticket queues, and there's also there's still some personnel shifts that I think are going to happen on the team as people adapt, which is natural. It's fine. And it's my responsibility to myself and my managers to lead them through that. I think if there's three things on the top of my mind that are immediate, it's those three.
Okay. Yeah, your work is cut out for you for sure. And again, all against the backdrop of incredible traffic volume and growth in that volume. So,
And expectation of uptime.
right. Yeah. I, you know, we certainly have that from the carrier world, and we don't even, when we're using products from these different hyperscalers or cloud native companies, you don't even think about the network, right? It
No.
just always seems to work. So, yep.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've been really lucky in my career. I really have, Scott, and I include you in this. I've been able to work with some really smart people, way smarter than me, and so that trend continues where I am now for sure, and I'm very thankful for it. Um, Both on my staff and the hyperscaler with whom we have great relations and we support. So it's a happy place.
I couldn't concur with you more, just feeling so fortunate to have worked with a bunch of people that are smarter than me. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I don't
way
know who you're
smarter.
talking about, Bill, because you're smarter than me. So
I'm just going to nod and pretend I understand. Exactly.
yeah,
Yes. And then later I'm going to look it up on Wiki. What the heck was that guy talking?
exactly. Exactly. And what an opportunity to learn, right? And keep
Yeah.
learning,
Yeah.
even at this phase of our careers, right? And we have to, right? There's never give up, never surrender, right?
Yeah.
You've got to.
I would even argue that the pace of knowledge needs to increase.
Yeah, no, you're not. Just was having a conversation last night with somebody about the exact same topic.
Yep.
Well, look, as we go around the final bend here, we try to wrap this up. Do you have any like key ops nuggets or lessons learned that you'd love to communicate to the audience? Is there one thing or a couple things that you've learned from this experience that you think other people really ought to get?
Another great question. So one, I'll say, it's important to any person who is kind of ascending in the management world, especially into higher level positions. And it's especially in the technical world. And I've known this years ago, but people manage what they can manage.
Hmm.
And the story I always tell around this is that, years ago when I was a government contractor, I worked on this one project. I was just an engineer on the local area network. I didn't have anything to do with the actual Army product, but I'm not going to mention what it was, but they had spent like $750 million. It was on the It's Your Money Now segment on the news and stuff. And
Right.
they didn't have anything, right? And there was a $5 a week coffee fund that you needed to, pay into if you wanted your coffee.
I remember the days. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And so this project was completely out of control. But if you didn't pay your $5, man, whoo-wee, and you got a cup of coffee, you were going to hear about it. So that's an extreme example, but it is something I see. People manage what they can manage. And you need to look at that both on your staff and on the people to whom you report and understand when that's happening. I think that's really important because things get missed. And, I'm not saying I'm some big guru on it. I tell my people this all the time, right? We all have the responsibility to watch out for each other. And if something's going sideways, you need to have the courage to say something, no matter who that person is. So,
Yeah.
this isn't even a technical thing. It's speak up. If you see something stupid, for lack of a better phrase, you have a responsibility to do something as a team member.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would say again is it's a bit of a throwaway line, but I bet it's true, is just like we were talking about, continue learning. When you stop learning, you're going to become obsolete very, very fast in this world. And I use that as a very kind of stern term. And what you do in the network today might not be what you do tomorrow, might not be what you do the next day, but it's going to change and you need to roll with it. Otherwise, you're just going to get left behind.
Yeah. No, totally agree. There's a whole other set of conversations going on that topic amongst my friends and my community. And I think the good side of that is it's all additive. Like you're learning new stuff and you're layering it on. Like I understand IP addressing. I understand how Ethernet works. I don't understand how Ethernet displays Sonnet. Yes, I do. But everything is a basis for learning the next thing. Right.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It's not like you forget the other world you were in.
Right.
Just like we started off the conversation, right? One of the fundamental things that I learned back in the day was the stuff that AT&T taught me, right?
Right.
That's carried me well into the remainder of my career.
We do stand on the shoulders of giants, right? I mean,
we do. We do, right? And there's respect there, but it's also okay to challenge. You should, right? Just because it was right 30 years ago doesn't mean it was right today. Maybe it was, but ask the question.
My nerdiest thing there is the very first time I actually went to the Nokia Bell Labs building in New Jersey. There's a statue of Alexander Graham Bell and Claude Shannon, and these progenitors of information theory and why an ISDN, B channel, a D channel is 64 kilobits per second, right? And the foundation of the telephone system, which is where so much of this got started. And I took a picture with each, and I still have those pictures. So
that's cool. Is that in Red Bank? Is that right? Or
I think it's in Red Bank.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's so there's the AT&T labs in Morristown, and then Nokia Bell Labs in Red Bank. No, it's not Red Bank. I'll figure it out later. We'll put it in the show notes.
No, we're really showing our age now, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We'll close with a fun question. Do you have any favorite music for maintenance windows? I know everybody's separate for maintenance windows today, but when you have to be on the maintenance window, what's playing on the bridge?
Dinosaur Jr.
Dinosaur Jr. That's right. I totally forgot about your affinity for them.
That's an easy one.
Cool. Well, look, thank you so much for this tiny little glimpse into the world of supporting the hyperscaler space. Bill, where can folks find you? Is there anything you'd like to promote or point people to for stuff that you're working on?
Reach out on my LinkedIn. That's not a problem. And if you have any questions, of course, as always, I'm happy to entertain them and answer the best way I can. So
awesome.
And I'm happy to be here. And thank you very much for having me. I like talking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure, and I'm sure we can find reasons to bring you back. Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you everyone else for tuning in to Total Network Operations. I'd love to hear your feedback, especially about topics you'd like us to cover, people you'd like to hear from. If you know someone or you are someone with important things to say about NetOps, let us know. These episodes provide a channel for you to promote your best practices and big ideas and help the broader NetOps community, just like Bill has here today. Please spread the word on TNOps. Let's get others involved in the conversation. You can drop me a DM on LinkedIn, just like Bill, or you can send us a follow-up to packetpushers.net/follow-up. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on TNOps.